Hey everyone, it's Sleepy Reader, aka Damien. I'm here on the East Coast. I'm gonna come to you with a bit of a sleepy vlog and tell you some of my adventures and my thoughts about a few things. Talk to you later. Actually, I will talk to you right now as soon as I edit this together. It is Sleepyvlog number 89. I'm here in Connecticut, as I guess I probably mentioned in the intro. This is the back porch of my mom's house in her retirement community, retirement village, I guess. And I'm going to, I guess, talk a little bit about my travels and a little bit about some of the comic books I've been reading. It was a while ago, but I just was reminded of the death of Robson Roca, who was a artist mostly that I knew, at least at DC, who did some pretty interesting work. He was never like my favorite artist or anything, but he was kind of a regular at DC, and it was kind of shocking to hear he had died of COVID. He lived in Brazil, where no doubt they don't have the vaccine like we do here in the US, or not much of it yet. If you have the option to get the vaccine, I highly recommend that. It's gone well for me and my family. And the Delta COVID thing is going crazy, which had a big impact on my travels. We booked this journey, which is just me and my daughter, before the Delta thing seemed serious. Maybe I didn't even know about it when I booked it. We were all inoculated, had been for several months, and thought, hey, now we can travel. But a lot of things are closed. A lot of things were very limited. We went to visit Washington, D.C., the Washington, D.C. area. I had friends in Silver Spring, Maryland, that we stayed nearby. And the idea was to mostly hang out with them. But we tried to go to various places in DC and museums, and many things were closed or limited admission, which I thought would be over by now. And you generally now again feel like, I almost feel like, did we make a big mistake booking airline tickets and stuff like that? I was just looking today. We're flying back this evening, and I was looking at the seating chart for the airplane we're traveling in, and it looks almost completely full, which now makes me uneasy again. And it feels like because so many people here in the U.S. don't want to vaccinate, we're going to start having to have tougher and tougher rules about everything. I'm hoping, and I know people who don't want to get vaccinated won't like this, but I'm hoping for some kind of official proof of vaccination and things that you can do if you are vaccinated. But now the fear of the Delta variant, which is spreading so fast, is probably just going to mean everything's going to shut down again, is my expectation. So anyway, sorry I got off on that. One of the cool things we did, because my friend that we were visiting got sick, we had more time on our hands on our own, so I contacted George, who runs the, you may have seen him once or twice on my channel, and I've been once or twice on his podcast, Meanwhile at the Podcast. And so I contacted George and said, hey, are you free to get together for dinner? So we met up with him at a Indian restaurant. Was it Indian? No, it was a Thai restaurant. Sorry, a Thai restaurant in his neck of the woods. Had some very good Thai food. At least I did. My daughter's food wasn't as good. And met George in person for the first time. And he makes a very strong impression. I think he's kind of a magnetic person. I don't know that we talked about comics that much. We didn't have a lot of time, and my daughter was there, and George was kind of grilling us about this and that. We did get to see the outside of his comic shop, which was closed early because it was a Tuesday afternoon or Tuesday evening. And so I guess they close early to put out the new comics. But that was cool. So slowly over time, my virtual world of comics becomes part of the real world of friends. Obviously, I have a few people and more people in the Portland area who I've met through YouTube. And I have, some other friends like Matt and Eric, who I consider now real friends and not virtual friends. Although, like, I've hang out so much virtually with Rasa and Terrence, I definitely consider them real friends. Well, I have hung out with Rasa in person also. So anyway, it's interesting how this goofy virtual world starts becoming real. And so now George is a very real person to me. We, here in Connecticut, we went duck pin bowling, which I don't think you can do anywhere outside of New England. Tell me if I'm wrong, if they have duck pin bowling where you are. Duck pin bowling, I realize now, is much harder to do than regular bowling. I mean, for kids, it's a little ball, so it's not so hard to hold. But that little ball is much harder to control and make it knock over a lot of pins. And you get 3 tries, but even with 3 tries, you get 3 tries per frame, 3 rolls per frame. Even with that, my score was quite low. I did not break 100, although I did get a strike one time. So anyway, that was interesting. I remember duck pin bowling as a kid. We would have birthday parties and go duck pin bowling. And we went miniature golfing, and we yesterday went to a place called It, that is a indoor rope place. I guess, what do they call it? Rope adventures. But they hook you up in a harness, and there's a track everywhere that your harness carries you, and there's all these different rope bridges and just narrow boards for you to cross, and things that go up and down to try and cross, and zip lines. And it was much harder to do than I thought. My shoulders ache today. Did a lot of hanging on to my guideline, I guess, as I was balancing on beams and stuff. They say they're the largest indoor one in the United States. I don't know if I've ever seen one of those before in terms of indoors. I've seen places with zip lines and stuff, but anyway, that was interesting, and it was just called It, I-T. And another really fun thing, and somehow science fiction feeling when you go in, we went to this Air and Space Museum that's outside of D.C. and is really huge, a giant hangar, more than a giant hangar, I guess, with airplanes and spaceships all over the place, some hanging way up in the air, some down on the ground. Because of COVID, we couldn't do any interactive things. We could not go up into their, whatchamacallit. They have either a replica or a real, but no longer in use, air traffic control tower. I really wanted to go up there. I used to fantasize about it being an air traffic controller. Not quite sure why. So I just read issue 3 of Mr. Miracle, The Source of Freedom, and I've been enjoying this all along, but I'm liking it even more now. It's getting quite complicated with this bad guy Nivar Free, who says she's the real heir to the Mother Box and to Scott Free, but Scott Free does not exist in this universe, and so I think she's a interdimensional bad guy who's going through all the dimensions and killing anyone who has a mother box and stealing it to be part of her empire. So pretty crazy, worthy of Jack Kirby kind of concepts. Still, like all of these DC comics, I just don't understand why they don't give you more of an explanation of which universe you're in. I had that same problem with Superman and the Authority, and this one is very much not our universe. And so another thing that's not explained is in the universe that this version of Mr. Miracle exists, where does the Mother Box come from? Are there new gods? There's no sign of it. So I would like a little. I don't know if we'll get all of that explained. We're going to get more explained because we have the appearance of Oberon. An Oberon, perhaps the Oberon we know from our regular DC dimension. I don't know where is he. He's more of a regular-sized looking man, just a little bit short. Whereas in Jack Kirby's Mr. Miracle, he was definitely a dwarf. So we'll see if this is supposed to be the Jack Kirby Oberon or a different Oberon. But really enjoying this one. On the other hand, I was looking forward to a new Tom Taylor comic. I always thought Tom Taylor would be a great Superman writer. This is Superman, Son of Kal-El, so it's sort of Superman, Son of Superman. I don't know if this is in our regular universe in the future or a slightly different universe, or because I haven't been reading Superman, maybe Superman is all... Clark Kent Superman is already gone, and his son John has already taken over, and this is just in the present. It feels like he's been Superman for a while, but I'm not sure. So somehow the story didn't click. It seemed to... what's the right way of saying it? It seemed to be just... I think it wanted to be like a mission statement of who John Kent is. I don't know. Does John... So he's son of Kal-El, Clark Kent. Does he have a Kryptonian name? I'm not sure. Obviously, he's only half Kryptonian. But they just... Tom Taylor just kind of wraps things up neatly in a bow by just saying, hey, it's wrapped up neatly in a bow. You believe in truth, justice, and a better world, so you are good. It just didn't click. I may try future issues. I'm not putting it on my pull list. We'll see how that goes. I already talked about a lot of these, the rest of these, on the Hangout with Terrence and Rasa and Earl Grey, but my favorite comic of the comics I read recently has been Barbaric. Incredible art, just really fun story. I love the battle axe. I love the female character, the witch character. Do they say her name very often, or is that why I can't remember her name? Soren. Oh, here she says, Soren, my name's Soren. So I really like Soren a lot. I like the axe. I don't know if the axe has a name. The axe is like your best drinking buddy who wants to get into a fight at every bar you go to. And also really cool, although I wasn't madly in love with the art, was The Last Book You'll Ever Read by Colin Bunn. I don't think there's anything wrong with the art. It just wasn't super to my taste, and maybe to my, like, the vibe I like in a horror comic in terms of art. But it all worked, good storytelling. I assume that's not Brian Michael Bendis there. I think it's a conservative talk show host of some kind. And also by Colin Bunn, Parasomnia is really cool. It could belly flop because it's come together a lot more in issue 2, but it's still a bit mysterious how all this is going to work. Incredible art by Andrea Muti and incredible colors. A lot of it may be kind of happen in a land that's both in the guy's imagination, but could become real as he starts to believe in it. So perhaps this Indian character, this American Indian character, is a figment of his imagination or part of his personality, although it feels like something more, and I really like that character. So if you're willing to deal with some uncertainty, I'd say along with Barbaric, Parasomnia is one of my favorite comics I've read recently. I also read 3 issues of ENIAC, and despite the great production by Jared Osborne, I'm underwhelmed, but I had fun reading it, but then after it was done, I'm like, that wasn't that much. There wasn't that much to it. Could have been just a 1-issue story or even like a half an issue story if it was done with dense, old-fashioned storytelling. And I'm not crazy about the art. So I feel like Bad Idea has, they're the comic book company that you can't get at most comic book stores. And they say there won't be trades and they say there won't be digital. So that sense of you're missing out kind of fed into my interest, and because I like to check out Matt Kindt, stories written by Matt Kindt. But at the end of the day, I think Bad Idea, if you miss it, is probably not a big deal. They're good comics, but they're not change the world, make a big difference in the world of comics. The more exciting thing, and I need to go back and read all 4, is this series of kind of whacked out stories in a world where superheroes exist, drawn by David Lapham and written by Matt Kindt, in which I don't know if in all the stories the superheroes are dead and they're just using their bodies. I'm trying to remember. In these 2 stories, it seems to be that way. In one, a guy is selling body parts. In another, a guy is using a ground-up superhero tooth as a drug. And these are wonderfully wacky stories, and I really like the art a lot. I'd love to see that series continue. Maybe is it just the 4 stories in the ENIAC, or are there a few other stories in some other Bad Idea comics? Also grooving on Made in Korea and the latest reprint mini-series of Usagi Yojimbo, The Dragon Below Conspiracy, which is much more of a complex story than the other Usagi stories that I've read. And I can see why it's going to stretch 12 issues. So it's interesting to see Stan Sakai tackle, because he's kind of a master of simplicity in the stories I've read. See him tackle a complex story. It does make me feel a little bit, have a little bit more of, hey, wait a minute, who are these characters? Maybe I should go back and read the last issue. So this might be a better Usagi. A lot of Usagi are extremely satisfying as buying the single issues. This one may or may not be a better trade read, or just something I'll want to reread when I get all 12 issues. And it does feel like it's hard to put my finger on how Stan Sakai's drawing style has changed. It has changed very subtly, because this is the old stuff, but I can't say exactly how. And I've grown to love, I don't think I liked it first, but I've grown to love the color, and very simple color and art in Made in Korea. I don't know how many issues this is, but it feels like it's just going to be 6 issues, I'm assuming. Although maybe they have some surprises in store for us. And Strange Adventures continues my feeling about Tom King that he is anti-superhero. He just wants to undermine and show the superheroes are weak and not up to the task. Because this is a little bit of a spoiler, but if you haven't read any of this, but not of this particular issue, but he's kind of saying that there are these alien invaders that are not possible for Earth superheroes to defeat. Which, yes, that's realistic, but it goes again, and that a hero would be totally defeated and make a horrible, horrible choice, that would be unforgivable, I think, no matter what good he does afterwards. So makes a horrible, horrible choice. So it just, I don't know. But I'm growing to really love Evan Shainer's artwork. So this is Mick Gerard's, and that's Evan Shainer. Evan Shainer, who was kind of brought in because he has that Silver Age vibe, really now has closer to, not quite Mobius, but to a European fantasy artist, comic artist kind of look. So definitely for the art, this is worth it. And if you're not at all bothered by having these Silver Age heroes and just the regular DC heroes turned into kind of loser jerks to some degree, then it's okay. So I'm not I am unhappy about one thing, that Strange Adventures has remained a $4.99 book. It does have, and I don't know if all covers did, all of them had the cardstock covers, but it does still have ads in the middle. I think Marvel, I guess there's less ads and maybe a few more pages. I appreciate that they put a lot of the ads in the back, I guess, but they should just put all their ads in the back, the way Boom or IDW does. I don't think it puts any less eyeballs on the ads. In fact, when I'm reading, I just skip over the ads as quickly as possible. When I get to the back of a book, say on a Boom comic, I will flip through the ads at the back and take a look at them before I close the book. But really at the cost, when it's more expensive to buy an individual issue than a trade, it's hard to believe the ads are so important to the economics of things that they need to ruin the flow of a comic for us. So, and then the other thing that I just sort of picked up online, I hadn't been checking the comic book sites as much as often, but I saw someone mention it on Twitter, and then I went and looked up what it was all about, is a bunch of top-level comic book writers have signed up with something called Substack, which as far as I can tell is merely a company that helps writers or other people create newsletters that they send to people who add themselves to their newsletter list, and it gives you a way to easily charge your newsletter people money for receiving your newsletter, and then Substack takes 13%, 10% for themselves, and 3% for the credit card charges. And they're throwing huge amounts of money at well-known writers to try to get them to switch from their regular journalism to this newsletter model. So I guess now they're hoping that whole comic books will come to people in a newsletter format, maybe with a link to a PDF or something, and that you'll pay someone like James Tynion or Jonathan Hickman or Nick Spencer $7 a month to receive whatever they put in their newsletter. And I kind of did the math, and I think, for every 1,000 subscribers you get to your newsletter, you're probably getting about 50,000 a year if those subscribers stick around a whole year. So you can imagine if you got 10,000 subscribers, that's like 500,000 a year, maybe. And my math is very loose there, because I think I was actually calculating on $5, not $7. But anyway, with that 500,000, presumably James Tynion or Jonathan Hickman is paying the writers and the letterers and the colorists and the artists and perhaps some production people, perhaps someone to edit it. So they must be getting, when they say it's the best deal they've ever gotten, either they're miscalculating, because that's what, like, for instance, James Tynion said. He said it was the best contract he'd ever got in his life. So he just couldn't resist it for the money and the good contract. But they must be throwing a huge amount of money at them in hopes of making this newsletter model really popular. But how many? I mean, I guess even if a fraction of Tynion's readers do this, he'll make a lot of money. But I'm not sure how much of that he needs to share with the artists and stuff. I mean, I feel like he should, artists and many of the other people should get a very large share, not just a one-time share, if you see what I'm saying, especially the artist and maybe the colorist. I'm starting to think colorists should get ongoing royalties, and maybe they do in the better contracts, because colorists are so important now. But maybe letterers too, some small piece of the royalties, if the letterer is crucial to the look of the comic. But that's a side issue. But I think mostly these writers who do this are going to be separating themselves from their audience. Most people probably are not going to last long on this newsstand model or newsletter model, or follow them in the newsletter model at all. I don't know. I mean, someone told me that this Substack has been around a while, and it might be this is their Hail Mary pass at making their high-tech model, their company, jump the chasm to success. They're hoping, and if not, they've just wasted their their angel investors' money, I suppose. Um, but so I don't think as a reader, unless it's a lot different than what I think, I don't think it's going to be a good reading experience. For me, my lowest level reading experience is on Comixology and Hoopla and Marvel Unlimited. If I, like when I'm traveling, if I don't need to read physically, I'll go to those things. But I don't want to read something in a newsletter format or in a PDF for very long. I followed some artists briefly on Patreon, and the draw was you get to read their pages as they come out of comics they're working on. And I just found myself not looking at it. In the end, I just said, I don't want to look at it now. I'm going to wait till the print version comes out and read it then. Now, of course, the Jonathan Hickman, the Tinian, all those things will eventually come out in print. It'll be interesting to see if they just come out, like will it first come out on Substack and then come out at Image in an individual issue and then come out in a trade? Or will it come out on Substack and then come out in a trade? I think if it comes out in individual issues available physically just a little bit later, the motivation to do Substack will reduce even more. So I feel the only downside of this is if it briefly draws away some of the better writers from Marvel and DC, and possibly from Image and the others. There'll be a brief reduction in the good writers' appearances in the comic book store, and then eventually the whole thing will, I assume, fizzle, and they'll be back. But exactly how it's going to play out and what it looks like, of course, still are not totally clear. But I just feel from the reader's point of view, this is a big nothing. Maybe from the industry point of view, it shakes things up. Maybe in some fields, writers can now ask their regular employer, like the New York Times or the Atlantic Monthly, to raise their rates there, because otherwise they'll go to Substack. Or maybe they can just do both. But I read, as I was trying to research Substack, I read about some art critic who writes for some magazine. I forget, it was New York Magazine or the Atlantic or something else. But he said that he was being offered $250,000 a year by Substack. They also, right now anyway, are giving out advances to writers they want to attract to be part of their system. So they're, rather than saying you just get 87% of whatever you make, they're saying we're guaranteeing you, we're going to give you $250,000 this year. So that's a guy who just writes articles, no artists or anything involved. And the reason he revealed how much it was is because he turned it down, because he said, I want readers, I don't care about money, because I guess he thought what I'm thinking, that he's not going to have, even if he can make that much money off of 4,000 readers, say, he's not going to have as many readers as he does, at least in theory, from a magazine like New York Magazine or the Atlantic or whatever magazine it was. So there's that. The other thing, I did read also quite a few comics digitally. I read Graffiti's Wall, a earlier Ram V story. It's not at all like the fantasy and superhero Ram V work. I guess, even the superhero Ram V work we've seen is fantasy, and I think he's an excellent fantasy writer. But in Graffiti's Wall, he's writing in a very imaginative style, and really the artist is drawing it in a very imaginative, beautiful style, a story about three friends in Mumbai who are kind of on the edge of things and, have greater hopes for later in their life. And the art was just magnificent, and I need, as I said on the Hangout, I need to find out more about this artist. He's an Indian artist. Maybe he's not worked elsewhere in English. Graffiti's Wall was originally published by Dark Horse. So anyway, I really enjoyed that one a lot. I also read the first 3 issues digitally of Chip Zdarsky's Daredevil run, and it was both super hooky. But after reading 3 issues, I didn't leap on to the next issue. Well, I was on the airplane and I hadn't downloaded anymore. But when I got off the airplane, I didn't download more because it was so intense. I felt like even though it's probably a story that's going to last for a really long time, I don't want to shotgun all the stories. I kind of would have rathered reading them month by month or every 2 weeks or however they came out because of the intensity of it. I think Daredevil may have killed someone, and it's not clear. He's convinced he didn't, but I'm, as a reader, not yet convinced he didn't. So Chip Zdarsky's writing's it surprised me because I'm used to stuff that's lighter by him. Very, very good with the dark and intensity. I still kind of, after loving Frank Miller's dark Daredevil, I kind of like when Mark Waid did the lighter Daredevil, I kind of prefer that at this point. I feel like the dark has been done. I never read Bendis or Brubaker Daredevil, and I probably should. I hear they're great, especially since I would like to read a lot more Brubaker stuff. And then I read a string of Captain America stories written by J.M.D. Matthias and art by Mike Zeck, and it was kind of a Deathlock story, with a clone of Deathlock and the real Deathlock and God somebody. I was really enjoying it, but by the end, I was kind of sick of it. I don't know. Something about J.M.D. Matthias's writing, at least on that series, it becomes too much for me after a while. Too much, maybe, not schmaltz or, I don't know. He overwrites a lot and feels too much. I don't know. But I forgot how good the Mike Zeck art is, and it was really good, like zooming into panels and stuff. Some artists, you rather just see the whole page, but with Mike Zeck's whole pages are good, and his covers are amazing. But I really enjoyed actually the panel-to-panel zooming on that one. I think that covers most of what I've read. Seems like there's a few other things. Well, I've read a bunch of Simpsons comics with my daughter, and we get them because Simpsons comics aren't published anymore. Boingo Comics either went under or just ceased publication because Matt Groening finally lost interest after 25 years. But there's a lot of really funny, good stuff, especially comic book spoofs, like superhero spoofs. Very knowing of Marvel and DC continuity, superhero spoofs hidden in those Boingo comics. Really, really good stuff. And so that's what we did as most of this trip as bedtime reading, me and my daughter. Okay, well, I hope you guys are having a good comic book week. And I don't know when I'll catch up with all my reading. When I get back home, there'll be at least 2 weeks worth of comics. And I'll be jet lagged and want to sleep and do other things. But I hope to get back in the groove of the comic book countdown in a week or two. Talk to you all later. Bye-bye. You want to do it? That's a good question. I don't know.
New Haven's been famous for much.
It has